So welcome everyone. Thank you all for showing interest in this training program that we're rolling out today. And the goal of this is to empower teachers with the right e-learning pedagogy skills that you can be well supported and equipped to really be comfortable in implementing digital learning platforms across your different capacities and classes that you're handling. So my name, as Vida mentioned, is Kiko Mugo. I'm currently the CEO of Angaza Elimu. So I'll quickly walk you through what Angaza Elimu is. As Vida mentioned, we are an education technology company, and we do two things in the education ecosystem. One, as I mentioned, is we have an adaptive and interactive e-learning platform that is able to deliver personalized and mastery-based learning experience to students. And beyond that, we amplify the student-teacher engagement so that they can reduce the inefficiencies that are experienced between these two capacities in and out of the classrooms. The second platform, which we're really excited about, is about equipping students to be innovators and equipped with relevant 21st century workforce skills. And here's an hands-on training on science, technology, engineering, art, and math. So those are the two products that we have in the market. And so to just speak about much about the first e-learning product that we have is that we're looking into mapping teachers, students, and parents in our product. And typically the benefits we're giving to students is when you speak about personalized learning, it's taking care of every student and meeting their own specific learning needs. And we've really been vindicated now that with COVID, that learning does not start or stop in classroom. Learning can happen anywhere, anytime. And we're looking in terms of how do we have collaborations between students and students studying at their own pace. And for us, we really believe that for the success of any e-learning platform, teachers are the real implementers of this, and that's why we're giving you a supportive tool to help you customize your instruction to students and deliver recommendations to track how students are progressing. And we'll be able to dig deeper into that. And for the parents, we want them to be part of this, for them to clearly understand how their students are progressing and for them to produce constructive feedback to the teachers. So far, with 3 years, 8 months old, and we've managed to do great impact. When we did an impact assessment last year, at the end of the year, that one of the key things that we noticed is students on our platform had made an average improvement of about 24%, with key skills improvement on English, math, and science subjects. With our STEAM program, we've looked in terms of reaching to more than 14,000 students, equipping them with concrete skills on 21st century workforce skills. For the teachers is that we want to reduce the administrative burden of the tasks that you every day do so that you can spend more time in teaching and personalized instruction. And in a year, we've managed to save teachers more than 45,900 minutes. And for the parents who have their kids subscribed on our platform, we managed to save them more than 7.8 million by just subscribing the students rather than buying other required textbooks. And for us, the reason why we came up with this program now when schools closed and when COVID hit, we are looking in terms of what exactly does remote teaching look like, or what exactly does digital learning and teaching look like. And we looked into three things about you as a teacher, right from when you plan in your lesson to when you deliver your lesson and when to check in for the understanding on how the students are progressing. And through this is when now we've come up with the different pillars that we want to train you across, right from lesson planning, developing your lesson notes, developing your assessments, holding virtual classrooms and event-rich classrooms, and then how do you give feedback to these students depending on how they are progressing. And on the side of the students, what we're trying to improve is that we bring about flipped classrooms models, where we have 3 scenarios: students, before they come into your virtual classroom, getting to interact with the content, take assessments, and we generate real-time data that you can have to use the teacher to deliver, to customize your instruction. And when they come into the classroom now, you're having the inquiry-based approach and the discussions that you're giving to the students. And right after, then you're gonna give the summative assessments to just see how the students are progressing. And so for that, as I mentioned, we have what we call in the the personalized learning path for the students, how you're giving recommendations, and the platform really able to identify what are the students' strengths and gaps, and how can we customize a specific learning path for every student through the recommendation and the diagnostic skills that we're going to look like. And then afterwards, then how can we generate a very clear learning path from this specific data. And with that, so just to sum up, with that I've just showed you is what we came up with these different pillars. And for today, our major focus will be looking into what exactly does lesson planning on a digital platform look like. And then the coming up weeks, we'll dive into each and every other of the pillar as shown in the poster. So thank you so much. And once again, I welcome you to this, and we look forward to giving you great value, and we hope that you enjoy. So I'll hand over to our trainer today, who is Teacher Maxwell, and he will walk you through the first pillar. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Kiko, for that brief walkthrough on our programs. So my name is Maxwell. I'm a teacher in a high school in Kenya. And I'll be your presenter today just to walk you through what I can call fundamentals of digital learning. And according to the schedule that we shared with you in various media, we are going to start with lesson planning, and or what we can also refer to as the lesson design. So when you look at lesson planning, I want to share my screen so that you can all be able to, I hope you can be able to see my screen. Vida, confirm?
Yes.
Yeah, we can.
Awesome. So lesson planning is a major input for any professional teacher out there. And we all know that lesson plans are written guides of what a teacher will do in order to achieve the goals during the lesson. So think about your lesson and how you want it to be. Having trained as a teacher, we were exposed to the traditional, or what I can call the legacy lesson plan, that follows a format where a lesson plan has to have a goal, objective, identification. In other words, what learning outcomes do you want to achieve? And teaching methods, or rather what you can call pedagogies. And then you must sum it up with an evaluation or an assessment. So in planning your lesson, you need to consider a few other things. For instance, you need to have an objective format or a structure where you are going to explain, or rather give learners an insight into what they're going to learn over that period that you'll be interacting with them. For online teaching, you must also map out timing of each section, and also allocate time for students to participate, because we don't want this to be a teacher-centered lesson. You have to let students participate in the lesson. You need also to schedule virtual breaks to allow students to chat, use the bathroom maybe, and maybe share feedback on how the lesson is going about. And basically, you don't need to ditch your regular classroom foundation. Furthermore, your lesson should aim at developing each of the 6 levels of cognitive domains or abilities of the learner, as brought about by Bloom in 1956 with his collaborators. He published a framework for categorizing educational goals, or what we can now refer to as taxonomy of educational objectives. So as educators, when planning and designing a lesson, we should make lessons that elicit different cognitive skills among the learners. Your lesson objectives should always aim at developing each of the 6 levels of cognitive domain. I'm going to briefly take you through this framework or taxonomy, so that we clearly understand as we draft our lesson plans, are our objectives aligned to these cognitive skills? So this taxonomy has 2 main levels. We have the lower level, or rather the lower level, which constitutes of the knowledge or remembrance level and understanding. And then we have the higher level that constitutes of skills to do with apply, analyze, evaluate, and create. So looking at the lower level of this taxonomy, when drafting your lesson objectives, incorporate questions that help learners in retrieving or recognizing or recalling relevant knowledge from long-term memory. The keywords that we can use in this frame or in this taxonomy at this level, we could use words like memorize, define, identify, repeat, recall, and probably examples of questions that we could ask in our lesson design. For example, if you are to teach a physics class at Form 1, you could ask, define physics. You see, this one only requires the learners to recall or remember what the definition of physics is. For maybe our counterparts from the primary school, grade 5, for instance, or grade 4, when they're looking at the human digestive system, you could ask a question, for example, identify the labeled parts of the human digestive system as shown below. You see, this one only targets the learner to recall the part is able to see and its name that he has learned prior to the lesson. The second level of the taxonomy is to comprehension or understanding. This is geared to test the student's ability to summarize and describe in their own words without necessarily relating it to anything. Keywords in this level could be describe, distinguish, yeah, explain, or interpret. And you could use such questions as, what facts or ideas show that a cat is a mammal? For example, if you're looking at classification of animals in grade 4, grade 5. In high school, you could use such words, describe the contact process. For chemistry teachers in the house, you know that that's a process used in manufacture of sulfuric acid and a sulfur and its compounds. Then to higher level of the taxonomy, where we start now looking at skills that help the learner to really blend in with the 21st century learning design. Application is a skill that is tested or highlighted in our lessons to encourage students to apply or transfer learning to their own life or to a context different than one in which they have learned. Keywords could be apply, compare, contrast, demonstrate, examine. And examples of questions, for instance, you could ask, what would result if you held a metallic spoon over a candle flame with bare hands? This could be primary science when you're teaching about modes of heat transfer. Basically, you want the students to relate what he has learned on conduction to the current scenario. So he's able to apply the knowledge he has learned on conduction to try and explain a scenario here on what would happen if one was to hold a metallic spoon over a candle flame for some time. You could also ask, how would you use a drinking straw to drink a glass of milk? For those physics teachers in the house, this is a topic in pressure Form 1. So you want the students to apply the concept of atmospheric pressure, or now explaining a scenario like, how do people drink using a drinking straw? Then we move to analysis. This is where you're breaking up knowledge in simple components. The questions in this level are targeting to encourage students to break materials into parts, describe patterns and relationships among parts, to subdivide information, and also to show how to put back the information together into a whole. So we could use keywords like analyze, differentiate, distinguish, explain, or research and separate. So a good question here would be, how do impurities affect the surface tension of water? Yes. And then lastly, we are looking at synthesis, where the students are now piecing small components of related knowledge into one. These questions encourage students to create something new by using combination of ideas from different sources to form a new whole. Keywords could be arrange, combine, create, design. And an example of a question here would be, for example, in English, when you're teaching phrasal verbs or phrases, put these words together to form a complete sentence. And finally, under this taxonomy, we have the evaluation. This means you're making value, judgment on knowledge acquired. So evaluation questions will always encourage students to develop opinions and make value decisions about issues based on specific criteria. So keywords here would be assess, critique, determine, evaluate, and so forth. And an example of a question here would be, do you think eating sugary foods is a good or a bad thing? This for grade 4, maybe if you're teaching about hygiene, personal hygiene, and taking care of your teeth. So if you bring up this question, see now you are leaving the student to make judgment on his own, and then prove as to why you think it's good and or bad. So as you make these, you incorporate these taxonomic level skills in your lesson design. Later on, we shall be looking at how to review your lesson against such. But also, because we are looking at teaching online, we must also look at what we call the TPACK framework. TPACK is simply an acronym for Technology, Pedagogy, and Content Knowledge Framework. The TPACK framework has been designed to provide a map for understanding how to integrate technology into classroom effectively. The framework was introduced by Ponya Mishra and Matthew Collier of Michigan State University back in the year 2006. It identifies 3 primary forms of knowledge. We have the content knowledge, CK, pedagogical knowledge, PK, and the technological knowledge, which is the TK. The content knowledge, CK, simply highlights what are you teaching and what is your own knowledge of that subject. In other words, you will need a solid understanding of the lesson concept, or simply your mastery of content as a teacher. Then we look at the pedagogical knowledge, the PK. It highlights on how do your students learn best and what instructional design strategies do you need as a teacher to meet their needs and the requirements of the lesson plan. So in this case, you will need to understand how to adapt to modern approaches that are student-centered, such as inquiry-based learning, active teaching and learning, problem and project-based learning, and blended learning. We could also be very keen on how you incorporate the 21st century skills in your lesson as a teacher. And then the third part of this TPACK is the technological knowledge. Yes, you have mastered your content very well. You have known how the approach you will use to teach these students, whether active teaching and learning or problem-based learning. But you need to teach this lesson over internet or maybe using technology. So what digital tools are available to you as a teacher? Which do you know well enough to use? And which will be the most appropriate for the lesson at hand? For example, in your lesson plan, students will need maybe to label a diagram and present. So the ability to fill in blanks with maybe an answer key or find images from the internet and create, let's say, PowerPoint slides or Google slides. These are some of the technologies that you must master as an educator to be able to instill in your learner as you look at this TPACK framework. But there are regions of intersection. When you look at the diagram on the left of your slide, there are regions of intersections between these 3 parts of the TPACK framework. These regions of intersections, they are critical because they represent deeper levels of understanding. We have the pedagogical content knowledge, what I call the PCK, which is a region of intersection between the pedagogical knowledge and the content knowledge, right? This region brings about understanding the best practices for the teaching, for your teaching of the specific content to your specific students. Then we have the technological content knowledge, the intersection region between the technological knowledge and the content knowledge. Knowing how the digital tools available to you can enhance or transform the content, how it is delivered to students, and how your students can interact with that content using technology. And then technological pedagogical knowledge, the TPK, brings about understanding how to use your digital tools as a vehicle to learning outcomes and experiences you want. One major critical part of this, the TPACK framework, and that's where it derives its name from. It is the center part, what I call the sweet spot, or the technology, pedagogy, and content knowledge center. This is the epicenter of this framework. And it represents a full understanding of how to teach with technology, keeping in mind that this is not the same as having knowledge of each of the three primary concepts individually. Instead, the point of the TPACK is to understand how to use technology to teach the concepts in a way that enhances student learning experiences. With these two frameworks that we've looked at, the Bloom's taxonomy, and then you blend in with the TPACK, you should be able to design a lesson that is going to bring about learning at a higher level. Remember the higher order cognitive skills that we are talking about. And then when you bring in with the technology, ensure you have incorporated the 21st century skills such as collaboration, creativity, and problem solving. All these blended together make a very good lesson. So as you plan your lesson, you should also be asking yourself, what format of e-learning do you want to adapt for your lesson? E-learning takes two different formats. We have what we call the asynchronous format, or what you can call the self-paced learning. In this kind of format, you are designing a lesson where the students will need to learn on their own, scheduled without any real-time instructor. The course content, in this case, lessons, pre-recorded videos and lectures and tutorials are put there for the students to go through by himself. Tests and quizzes, homework and assignments can be accessed by the student enrolled in the classroom or in the course at any given time, as long as the course is active and available. This is what we most get on learning management systems, where teachers upload materials, videos, PDF format, notes, and all that, and students can take their time, go through the material at their own pace. This enhances what we call self-learning. Lessons may also be administered on LMS such as Moodle or maybe Google Classroom or Tovuti to bring out clearly the e-learning pedagogy. The learner is able to control the amount of material they consume. So in this case, the teacher does not define how much the learner can get. The learner, depending on his pace, will be able to either get more content or get less content within a given time. But there is a hybrid between the asynchronous and the later on format that I'll talk about in this slide, the synchronous one, which is brought about by having lack of physical instructor in an e-learning, being made up by having what we can call a guided learning strategy. Now, in this guided learning strategy, it's a middle ground between asynchronous and synchronous, whereby, yes, there is no any physical instructor to guide the learners through, but the learners are guided through the course by what you can call a digital avatar or a character or a guide. In simpler words, you have an animated character that is guiding the learners through the course online. So there is no physical instructor, yes. There is no teacher who is there with the learners, but the learners are guided through the course content by a digital character or what we can call an avatar. This approach helps infuse e-learning with human touch. And therefore, learners will feel as if there's somebody who is psyching them up to cover certain content. And then the second most e-learning format is what we call now the live online classes, the synchronous. What most of you who have been practicing e-learning and teaching have been doing, live Zoom classes. In this kind of format, they are organized in a live virtual meeting room, like what you are doing right now. Students and learners meet together to communicate with voice, video, whiteboard, and also the students and instructors need to be online at the same time. Meetings and lectures occur at the same hour, and therefore all attendees must be online and connected to the internet at that specific hour. So whatever format as an educator you prefer to use in delivering your lesson, you should consider an appropriate lesson plan to guide your content delivery effectively. An example of a model of a lesson plan that you could use in delivering your content, whether you're going to go the synchronous way or the asynchronous way, is what we call the 4A lesson plan model. The 4A lesson plan model focuses on 4 main concepts, each necessary for student success. We have the topmost level that we call the activate prior knowledge. Yeah. In our legacy lesson plans, where we have normally the introduction section, you could use that part to activate prior knowledge. What do the students know about the concept you're about to teach? Do they have any prior knowledge or schema? So you're simply assessing the entry level of the learners into that particular lesson. What activities can enhance activating prior knowledge or assessing the entry level? You can use gallery walks, where you have just put things together and you let students go around to learn silently without necessarily reading somewhere or anything. You can use brainstorming sessions. You can use concept maps. Concept maps are visual representation of knowledge that brings out in a nutshell what the knowledge will be all about. For example, in a concept map on branches of physics, maybe if you're teaching physics at Form 1, yes. You could use gamification. You use a game to teach a certain concept before you teach the learners. The learners are able to play around with the game and learn 1, 2, 3 things. You could also use a Q&A section, Q&A method or technique. This is what we are normally accustomed to as teachers, using questions to preview what the learners know about the concept at hand. Then we have the second part of the lesson plan. We call it the acquire new knowledge. This promotes higher order thinking to enable students to make connections and interconnections between the course material and real life experiences. It fosters inquiry throughout the lesson and among the students. We could use methods like bringing in expert videos to your class. This can be equated to what we call the lesson development in our normal lesson planning. So you can bring in expert videos, open educational resources from the internet, links and all that. You could also bring in guest speakers, yeah, to just brainstorm and introduce the learners to the content of the day. You could use visual representations. You can use maybe role plays, think, pair, and share technique. Yeah, all these, we can bring it out in the field of acquiring the new knowledge for the learner. And then the third level of this lesson plan is the application. This is where now you are consolidating what has been learned from the previous level, which is the acquire new knowledge. So you are consolidating what has been learned to make it relevant. Yeah, learners can do debriefing on the processes and performances, real world activities, scenarios, simulations of processes. For example, if you're looking at maybe a process in photosynthesis, you can have a simulation process here. Now, cementing what the learners have learned theoretically on photosynthesis, you bring in a simulation video to show how maybe a maize seed germinates or a bean seed germinates. And then finally, this model, we have what we call the assessment. In the assessment, this is where the learners will reflect and gain and give feedback. So you want to do an assessment to gauge what has been learned and what needs to be further developed. So you can use peer reviews where learners will review each other. Maybe a learner had a task to present something that on the knowledge that he had gone to do a research. The learner presents. You as the teacher, you'll have to give feedback to how the learner performed, allow other learners also to critique how the learner presented his content. So you could use open and closed book tests. You could still use think and pair. You could use small conferences, and you can even use rubrics assessment rubrics. I'll take you through examples of an assessment rubrics later in the presentation. So with this model of lesson planning, can we now have a look at a template of a synchronous lesson plan and another template on a synchronous lesson plan. So starting with a synchronous lesson plan, this will redirect us to a document. I hope we can all be able to see that document. Vida, confirm that.
Yeah, Teacher Maxwell, we're able to view.
Yes.
Very good. So this is a template on the 4A lesson plan guide. So basically, your lesson plan will look like you have the topic at the right top there. You'll have the topic there and then the subtopic, and then give an overview of the lesson. For example, in this lesson, you'll be able to learn about, let's say, classification of animals, and maybe you'll also be introduced to maybe characteristics of animals. So where in the onboarding section, I can also call it the orient section. What's the key concept and how will the learner go about it? Why is the learner there? What are the objectives or the lesson goals? What are the specific learning outcomes that you want this learner to come up with, to gain? Which will the learner need before maybe starting the lesson? For example, at this point, you can take time to tell the learner maybe you will need access to maybe a computer with internet connectivity. You need maybe a resource. You will need such things. You can also take time to tell the learner the lesson duration by telling them each section of the lesson will take how many minutes. For example, if the introduction, if the lesson development, if it's the apply and practice, and then if it's the assessment, how long it will take. So the introduction section, what I have mapped to what I call the activate prior knowledge. You want to assess what the learner knows about the concept. I've already discussed those methods as I was giving you a briefing on graded quiz. A true-false quiz. For example, if you're teaching about mammals, this is, remember, a lesson that you want the learners to go through. So to have a look at. So you want to teach this learner about mammals. You want to get, does this learner know anything about what an animal is or what mammals are? So you could ask a question. All animals are mammals. True, false, or maybe. So the learner takes time. You're assessing the prior knowledge of this learner on mammals. And then you could also ask another one. All mammals are warm-blooded, you see? So this is where now you're able to gauge, does this learner know what the concept of at hand is? This is where you also highlight on what you call the key inquiry questions to inspire a quest for knowledge and discovery. So you're preparing this learner to go into the next stage, wanting to know, this question that the teacher asked me about a mammal, what is it? Or are all mammals animal? Are all mammals warm-blooded? Or are all mammals animals? Or are all animals mammals? So this encourages and develops critical thinking processes. Key inquiry questions could be examples such as, what is a mammal and what are the characteristics of mammals? So as the learner goes into the second level of this lesson, where we call it the acquire new knowledge or the lesson development, he wants to acquire new knowledge to promote higher order thinking, yeah? So that he can make connections and interconnections between course and real world experiences, yeah? So for example, you could give a task, for example, for the learner. So you're telling the learner or you're briefing the learner that in this section, you will watch a video, you give the URL there, and read an article about this and this and this to learn more about characteristics of mammals. So the learner is able to click on that YouTube link, watch that video. The learner is able to read an article, and then as he goes through or as he listens to the video or reads the article, he should be able to take note of things like, what are the major characteristics of mammals? How do we classify mammals? And what are examples of mammals? So you could at this point also give a quiz to evaluate or to assess whether the learner has been able to go through the resources and had some meaningful learning. So in this quiz or multiple choice, which is graded, by the way, this is just a mini assessment intervention to help the learner gauge readiness, while the educator to capture the responses on a learning management system. An example of a quiz here would be, you want to assess whether learning has taken place here. What did you learn about this video? Then you give options, yeah? A mammal is a kind of an animal, but not all animals are mammals. Maybe this is one of the things that was highlighted in the video or in the article. So if a learner was able to go through those articles well, he's able to relate to this and say A or B or C. Into the third part of this lesson template, the practice and apply section. We've said that this is where we consolidate what has been learned to make it relevant. Yeah, learners are able to relate the knowledge learned to put down things in the real world to apply the knowledge that they have learned. Yeah, they can independently work through the content while engaging with others through virtual collaboration teams, for example, on WhatsApp, or connect and reflect on a given mission. Yeah. So they can use the acquired knowledge to embark on solving real world problems or engage in activities. For example, you could give an activity here. List at least 3-5 mammals found around your community. Out of these 5 mammals, select 1 mammal out of the 5 that you have listed, and your mission would be to classify the mammal that you have selected using the criteria shown below. So you give a guideline on how they should classify the mammal. So does the mammal you selected have fur or hair? Yes or no? So for example, in their community, if we find we have hyenas, or maybe we have goats in their community, they'll be able to tick against it. So by giving the name first of the mammal that they have selected, and then being able to tick about that criteria. Does it drink its mom's milk? Yes or no? Does it have a backbone? You see, you are just gauging the learner's understanding of the characteristics of the mammals. Now applying that knowledge just learned into the real world scenario. So the learner at this point may also be required you might also be required to schedule a live session or a presentation session where the learner is able to share what he has come up with others. This could be through maybe Google Meet or any other virtual platform. And the purpose of this live session is for the learner to get feedback, and also for him to be able to give feedback on other people's work, and therefore use this feedback to adjust his knowledge acquired. So for example, you could say in the live session, you will share your classification of mammal you selected, including a picture sketch of your mammal in a PowerPoint presentation. Answer the guiding question in your presentation. Of course, the guiding question that we had communicated earlier, what is a mammal and what are the characteristics? Finally, the last part of this model is the assessment, where the learners are giving feedback and reinforcement. So to gauge what has been learned and what needs to be further developed based on the feedback received from the peers and the educator. So you as the educator, you need to document all the students' work, assessments, and engagements on the learning management system Drive, so that you'll be able to give a grade at the end of the lesson, or maybe at the end of the class. This is a self-paced lesson. It can, depending on the time you've allocated, this can even take 1 week or 2 days, depending on how fast the learner is in going through the lesson. Then for a synchronous lesson plan, now where you as the educator, you are there going to take the learners through the lesson virtually. Yes, they are seeing you, you are guiding them. It's just like the normal class that we teach, but there is no physical contact. The difference is that you are just transferring that classroom teaching to a virtual online platform. So this synchronous lesson plan, how would it look like? It doesn't look any different from what we have been used to. So this is an example of a biology lesson plan that has been coded to assess different standards. So that is just the introductory part, the components, that is the teacher, your name, school, county, class, duration, number of students for that particular class, or number of attendees or participants for this case. Giving a rationale is very important because you are preparing the learners to know what to expect, right? Also stating the objectives. Now, in stating your objectives, you need to be very keen because now you are telling the learner on what are the expected learning outcomes, yeah? And stating your objectives, you should always follow that taxonomy. We have looked at the Bloom's taxonomy. For example, in the first objective, define keywords. Yeah, what is taxonomy? A taxon, binomial nomenclature, hierarchy of taxonomy. What is this bringing out in the Bloom's taxonomy? It's bringing out what we are calling understanding part. And then draw and label a diagram of taxonomic units. That objective will bring out the synthesis skills in the learner. And then identify the general characteristics of animals. This will bring about the identify part or the knowledge part of that, because they need to remember that. Prerequisite skills and knowledge that these learners might need to know. The knowledge prior to the lesson, that is specimen collection skills, that's understanding. Then students will be required to engage their drawing skills, observation, analysis, and recording. Yeah. Then 21st century skills. Remember I said you must try to incorporate 21st century learning design in your lessons. Are you bringing out creativity? Are you bringing out collaboration, critical thinking? What about communication? How will that lesson develop these skills in the learner? And then, of course, highlighting the resources that you might need for the learner, the laptops, projectors, maybe if the learner needs a tablet, he needs to, these are the resources that they might be required in this lesson. So going forward onto the lesson development process, introduction bit, you can see I've really coded this lesson so that you understand when you are talking about introduction and the time mapping, what is taxonomy? You are talking about understanding according to the Bloom's taxonomy, list taxonomic units, all that. Then in the development stage, show students a video on a classification of an animal. So you're using the gathering aspect of the taxonomy. Observe and compare images of different animals, analysis part, identify part. So all these are ways in which you can use your Bloom's taxonomy and the TPACK framework to design an exemplary lesson plan. So these resources, I think, with time we'll be able to share with you teachers later on, so that you can take time to go through them at your own pace. So once you've designed your lesson plan, like the two that we have looked at up there, what should you assess? How do you know that your lesson plan is exemplary? Yeah. There is what we call an assessment rubric that every teacher needs to know, so that when you're deciding your lesson plan, you can always assess your lesson plan against this rubric. So I'm calling it the TPACK and the 21st Century Teaching and Learning Review rubric. So as it loads, this lesson design review is divided into two parts. My slide might be a bit smaller, but I'll try to see if I'll zoom it. So the first part is the TPACK lesson design assessment rubric. What does TPACK, what does this rubric assess? It will assess the technologies and curriculum knowledge, the TCK. It will assess the technology and pedagogical strategies, the TPK, the technology selection, the TK, that is part one. So under the technology and curriculum knowledge, TCK, when do you know you have an exemplary lesson plan that is aligned to this? When your lesson is excellent, the presentation with one or more STEM curricular learning. For the technology and the pedagogical strategies, your lesson is well aligned when it has blended the use of technology. It strongly supports pedagogical strategies for interactive teaching and learning, and also the 21st century skills for critical thinking or collaboration. Technology selection, that is technological knowledge 1, have you used the appropriate technology selection for curriculum goals and pedagogical strategies? If yes, then does your technology selection, presentations or simulations, are they exemplary in a given lesson design objective and pedagogical strategies? And then the technology, pedagogy, and the content, the TPAC fit, right? Does it, do the strategies you've chosen and the technology fit together strongly within a lesson? When all that is done, you know that your lesson is exemplary and it's ready to be used. The second part of this rubric is assessing the 21st century teaching and learning lesson design assessment. So you want to assess in your lesson design or your lesson plan, how is critical thinking been highlighted? The teacher in the lesson, the teacher in the lesson design, has he developed a learning environment for students' planning, design, and execution of real-world problems using higher order thinking and questioning skills? Still on critical thinking, have the students in the lesson design be able to use multiple resources to plan, design, and execute real-world problems? When it comes to collaboration for the teacher, has the teacher in the lesson design developed a learning environment for students to form collaborative teams and solve real-world problems? And for the students' part, has the students in the lesson design formed a collaborative team to solve real-world problems and create original work? So these rubrics will gauge whether your lesson design is exemplary and whether it is ready to go live or to use to design your lesson. I'll also share those resources later on. If you might not have the time to create a very comprehensive lesson plan, there is what you call a skill plan. A skill plan is a quick access or a quick tool that you can use to plan your lesson. It is a clear building block for interactive digital content development, adaptive assessment, track student skill and mastery levels. So this will be like an activity to us. I'll show you an example of this, where an activity to build maybe a skill plan based on a subtopic place values for mathematics teachers in the house. So if you are to build a skill plan for that subtopic, so an effective skill plan, for example, you're working as a Form 1 math teacher and you want to do a skill plan on the subtopic place values. So this is what you do. You'll have to highlight the number there, the subtopic place values, and then the skill. For example, finding the place values of a digit in a number and understanding the significance of all these digits in the number. So this is like a basic framework that highlights in a nutshell what you need to achieve as an educator and what the learners will gain from this. So later on, maybe Kiko will need to communicate this. All of you guys who registered for this training, we are going to create for you accounts for free on our Angaza Elimu platform so that you can continue accessing free resources and materials that will help you improve on your delivery as a teacher. So just maybe to take you briefly into the Angaza platform, and once you have received the sign-in credentials, this is what it will look like for you. So this is our Angaza platform. You will be able to access on the left pane, you can be able to see quiz progress, assignment progress, learning plan. I've been logged in. Probably I need to zoom out a little bit. So you can see I'm logged in there, Maxwell. So you'll be able to access things like quiz progress, assignment progress, learning plan. So the learning plan is what I'm calling the skill plan. That's how it will look like, so that you can come here into the platform, create your skill plan, and from there you start now developing your lesson content. And we'll do all this work for you so that we leave you time to dedicate fully on creating content that is going to bring about meaningful learning. So you can come, for example, if you select a class, if you're a primary school teacher, class 6, 7, 8, Form 1, 2 for secondary. So if you click on, like, let's say Form 1, you select the subject. Is it CRE, English, science, and all that? So maybe because I'm a teacher of physics, I'll click on physics. Then we will also be able to populate all the topics. For example, introduction to physics, I'll click there. Then subtopics, we can also bring in there. Physics as a science, I'll bring it there. Then input skill. What do you want learners to gain from this? So you'll key in your skills that you want, then you are able to create your skill plan. When you click here, your skill plan will be created. These are some of the things that we'll be able to look at as we proceed with this training. So as a recap on what we have done, I'm coming to the end of this presentation. The key takeaways for this today's lesson planning: it's important for us to use cognitive skills framework as a guide in lesson planning. And then TPACK framework in lesson design as a map for understanding how to integrate technology in classroom effectively. And then asynchronous versus synchronous, take note of the e-learning lessons format before designing your lesson plan, and develop a skill plan as a building block for interactive digital content development, assessment, and evaluation. Some useful skill links that you might need later on. We have our angazaelimu.com website there. Keep note of that. Our moderator will be able to share this in the Q&A section so that you can take time to go through it. Just for further reading on the Bloom's taxonomy, you can get it there on Schoology, and probably